Okay, I want to finish up this week on the Great Depression. So next week we can move on to the New Deal. Again, the question on the midterm, what happened? Again, the 20s is a pro-business era, more government deregulation, except for, of course, prohibition, which is an immense government regulation in alcohol. But and here's one of the middle president during the 1920s. And we start with Harding, goes on to Coolidge. Coolidge becomes president with the death of Harding. Again, he's a classic conservative Republican, minimum government intervention in the economy, right? He doesn't want reforms that may discourage business leaders from investing their capital into new projects, right? He wants to, um, again, allow business to grow. And he has policies that will allow business to grow. So, as he says, the business of America is business. And again, Americans do love their business and business leaders. It's always been the case. So, again, keep government out of the way, in a sense, have government facilitate businesses. So, in the 1920s, here we do get high business productivity, and businesses produce so much more than they have ever have in the past. With again that scientific management, Mr. Taylor is one of the pioneers. There is this increase in corporate profits. Big businesses are making money, and of course, if businesses have money, they will use that money to try and influence things. Again, just like Mr. Trump was in New York last night, and if what I think you had to have $300,000 to be able to sit with him at the dinner. If you wanted to meet him, $100,000 or show up, you got to have 35,000. But again, to mingle with people that have control over policy, it takes a lot of money that you and I generally don't have. Um, so again, we're increasing, and there's still taxes on imported goods. So again, Americans had to buy American products, and again, this is one of the happens when you have businesses putting their money behind their policies and trying to get the government to enact policies that are good for them. And again, if there are taxes on imported goods, that's good for American businesses because, again, Americans can only buy American. This is before America's, again, this international power. We have international corporations selling around the world. It's kind of different today. So again, government out of business, business into government. A lot of businessmen go into government, right? But of course, there is this other part of the 1920s, some of the racism involved, the farms are suffering, the unequal income distribution, the rich getting richer, that has to really be part of the essay. Also, I would think high consumer debt. Again, a lot of workers, their wages were suppressed because unions were suppressed in the 1920s. Again, this does help out corporate America if unions membership is down. So again, that will keep wages down, and then consumers still want to buy things even though overall wages are down, so they go into debt. Uh, and again, banks will loan money to these consumers, and businesses, car companies loan directly to their consumers too, because they thought everything was getting better and better and better. They did not see an end to this, the 1920s. They didn't see the Great Depression coming. Um, And the farms, please. That's what goes on in the 1920s. The Roaring 20s. It's great in the city, but farm life is just abysmal. Again, especially after they made huge profits in World War One, put a lot of money into increasing production, but then prices drop at the end of World War One when there's those markets basically dry up, um, and the farmers really suffer. And again, it's one of the causes of the Great Depression because still a lot of Americans live on the farms, live in rural settings at this time. And again, the idea is nothing can go wrong in the 20s, right? In 1929, people think it's getting better and better, and you can understand it in a way, right? There are these new technologies and these new products, cars, trucks, electricities. Again, they weren't around 20 years before. Uh, and we really can't understand these magical inventions changing people's lives. It'll just continue and continue and continue. And again, our friend, this is Mr. Frederick Taylor here, coming up with these new, again, business processes that make things more efficient. Business companies are getting larger because, again, there is no antitrust law at this time, and these large firms can be very efficient with this mass production, this assembly line. And again, unions are basically kept in check, right? You got the picture in the upper right-hand corner, these children, laborers. Again, child labor laws are not really taken on in the 1920s. Again, this would be an anti-business move. So again, so pro-business, everything's going well. Mr. Hoover, of course, will become the president. And in 1928, this is just a little bit a year before the Great Depression, he has this great speech. We're going to notice in bold, we in America today are nearer to the final triumph over poverty than ever before in the history of the land. And again, it's growing and growing, and prosperity is going to increase. Right? The next line, the poorhouse is vanishing from among us. So vote for me, and we'll keeping this progress running. And I can really understand, especially after going through 2007, the recession of 2007, just before in 2006, he thought again that nothing would ever go wrong. So again, this is a good slide to look at before the tests, right? What goes on with the Great Depression? Because again, there's so much exuberance, how things are going so well. The stock market basically is hitting record highs, and really record highs. Because people think it's going to continue. Corporations are going to keep making all of their profits, and everyone's going to get rich. Again, this is a combination. These companies coalesce into these huge corporations. There's no antitrust laws during this time, right? They're not enforced. They're on the books. They're not enforced. But what happens is it gets to be an overproduction. They start producing more than people are consuming. It gets too exuberant. People get too greedy again. If you do this essay on the test, a lot of people are greedy in the 1920s, and it's never a good thing to happen. Again, the same thing in 2007, a recession. Greed is kind of the underlying factor. There are some higher taxes, but again, Mr. Mellon, don't forget, Mellon, the Treasury Secretary, basically decreases taxes for everyone, but especially for the wealthy. And again, there's this high consumer debt. Wages are down because unions are suppressed. A lot of companies use this Red Scare. We're worried about communists. Unions are like communism. Basically controlling unions, keeping wages low. And so the regular worker, again, the majority of the people who are workers are losing their purchasing power, right? The money they get in their work does not cover the purchases they want to make. Again, this income inequality adds to this thing. There's a few rich, but there's many, many poor people. There is some technology, and again, if someone wants to do for the research paper, technology taking away jobs, the same thing happens in the 1920s. And again, if technology takes jobs away, machines replace workers, then there are less workers making money to buy stuff. And people have to buy stuff for the economy to grow. The construction industry is down. There are less houses being built in the 1920s. For some people, that's a key ingredient to what causes the Great Depression. The farms have a problem, but one of the biggest problems, of course, is that banks have flaws. Again, the banks loan money to people to buy things. Part of this debt problems. The banks actually got involved in the stock market. Because a lot of banks, again, I put my money into the bank. The bank basically has to do something with that money to make a higher interest rate to pay off the depositors with a little interest rate. So banks at the time were allowed to invest in stocks. We'll see that this will change during the New Deal. But a lot of banks had bad investments because they were greedy too. They wanted to get into this whole things going up and up and up. So again, when banks fail, it is really catastrophic for an economy because banks loan money for businesses to start and for businesses to expand, generally. So they have problems. It is difficult for all of us. All right, but again, something is very wrong. And here you can see the stock market bubble. Here's the stock market just before going up and up and up in the late 20s. And then in 29, it starts to come down and come down quickly. Basically, there's nobody wants to own stock. So people are trying to sell their stocks and no one wants to buy it. So again, they got to keep dropping the price, and a lot of people borrowed money to buy into the stock market. That's called buying on margin if you were a stock market player, because if it's me and you saving our little income that we get and put it in the stock, you're not going to make a lot of money. If you borrow, like say $1 million, and then play the stock market and it does well, you can make a lot of money. Or the other case where it goes down and people lost everything. Um, you can see it really bottoms out in 32, the stock market. So again, there's this huge meltdown in the financial system, these traditional banks and investment banks. I will talk about the difference between these two because they will be broken up in the New Deal. But basically, a lot of these banks, some of them had these foreign bonds too, which is just a little thing, but they were fake bonds issued by foreign businesses that didn't exist because everyone's trying to make a quick buck. It's a strange time. So listen to this if you're going to do that essay on the Great Depression and the notes from Monday. Good luck. Email me if you have any questions.